So good morning and welcome everybody. And let me just start out by saying, some of the stuff that Lee was talking about, the very nice things he was saying about representing the safety structure, it's a little bit humbling to be in front of this group and also to be able to represent such an amazing set of volunteers that really work 24/7, because after all, airline operations are 24/7 endeavors, and so must safety, security, and our pilot assistance activities be. So I begin by thanking them for all the amazing work they do on your behalf. I begin by thanking our engineering and air safety staff, communications, everybody else for making us look so good and supporting us. And also, especially to this group, I really begin by thanking you for the support that you give to our safety volunteers. So in a world of talking heads and self-professed aviation experts, what is it about ALPA that makes us stand out so much from the crowd? Well, the answer is easy. It's because we are certainly amongst the most credible voices in the world of commercial aviation, no doubt whatsoever. The difficult part, however, is establishing and maintaining that credibility in the industry. So what I'm going to do over the rest of this presentation, I'm going to give you some clear examples and some great demonstrations of how we continue to be such a valued voice in the world of air safety, security, and pilot assistance. Everybody remembers how the year started out, or maybe they don't because it's hotter than Hades out right now, and memory tends to fade a little bit fast. But we had a very, very unique kind of start to the year because we had something which has now come to be known as the polar vortex. And actually, I was just watching a newscast the other day, and they said it was the most significant weather event in the airline industry, winter event in history in terms of pre-cancellations and weather delays and everything else. The other thing that was coincidental with the arrival of this polar vortex was the June 4th transition to the Part 117 regulatory rules. And unfortunately, although the coincidental timing of having this major weather event was rather unfortunate with the changeover to the regulations, nevertheless, what it did is it gave a number of airlines out there the opportunity to try to glom on to this irregular weather operation and ascribe all the woes of the world to the Part 117 rulemaking change. And in fact, what they did is they enlisted media support, or at least they attempted to try to begin the process of undermining that rulemaking activity that we had worked so long and hard to achieve. But the fact of the matter is that we were able to stop them dead in their tracks because we were the credible voice. We got out there ahead of the story. We had very, very talented experts. We had talking points all bundled up, or as the media relations and communications folks would tell you, we had our bags packed. I know anybody who has been through media training here knows what we're talking about. So again, we became the trusted and credible voice by having a plan of action, strategic points, and as Fred Eisler would say, we had the righteous argument, right? Our work, of course, is not done in the flight time and duty time area, and certainly not with the Part 117 arena. We will continue to advocate for the Safe Skies Act of 2013, which will hopefully ultimately eliminate the cargo carve-out. And additionally, just yesterday, we met with a Fee for Departure group in the meeting room just across the corridor there, because even though the rulemaking was very beneficial, there are still nevertheless some lingering legacy issues that come with any rulemaking change, and we're trying to hammer out some of those things, get the FAA to give more clarity in terms of interpretive language, especially with the issue of flight duty period extensions and how they treat reserve periods. ALPA has also been lobbying Canada's transport minister to act on the flight time duty time recommendations to set science-based flight time duty time rules in Canada, because just as we know, fatigue is not related to what's on the other side of the flight deck door, neither should fatigue be based on what's on the other side of the border. Another big regulatory change that happened recently was the first officer qualification, which created an ATP or restricted ATP classification for airline operations effective last summer. Well, as was the case with the Part 117 activity, ALPA was involved in the work leading up to the FOQ rule. In fact, Chuck Hoagman, our aviation safety chair back there, was on the original rulemaking committee. And we're in the process of ensuring at this very executive board that our policy keeps up with the times as borne out by our proposed resolution on pilot training, otherwise known as the ab initio. Delegate 4 will receive a full, thorough brief. I invite you to join us there, ask questions, and we will continue at every subsequent board to make sure that we're bringing policy forward to make sure that we are keeping up with the changes in the time, especially with the regulatory world. Another thing which happened just last December, I'm sure everybody was aware of, was that the FAA came out preemptively with an announcement they were going to change the screening standards that were used for your visit to the AME. And in fact, they're going to come up with one trigger point based on body mass index to put pilots in the situation where they have to go through subsequent screening. Well, the FAA Federal Air Surgeon recently released new draft guidance to aeromedical examiners on how to detect and address OSA as it affects airman medical certification. We were involved, we were at the table, we were at the FAA, we were meeting with the Federal Air Surgeon. And although we are generally pleased with the direction of the latest guidance and the fact that the agency dropped its plan to use BMI as one single trigger point, we're still continuing to make sure that discussions continue to ensure that our pilots have adequate time to adjust to this change. In fact, just this past April, we had one of those seminars that Randy was referring to, and I believe it's a great sign of the credibility that ALPA has, is that at this event that we just had, both the FAA's Federal Air Surgeon and his Canadian counterpart actively participated in the one-day seminar at our Pilot Health and Medical Certification Conference. In fact, it was the very first event that the newly minted Federal Air Surgeon, Dr. Fraser, attended in DC, so I think that gives you an idea of the clout that we have. The seminar addressed ALPA's health-related priorities to include Part 117, occupational safety and health, extending the duration of pilot medical certificates for those of you at BOD. Last time around, that was one of the changes that came out of Delegate, and of course, sleep apnea and more. Continuing our well-received series of one-day special focused conferences in Washington, D.C., on June 16th, we're going to be holding another one. And this one is on the proactive data sharing and definitely with an international flavor. The FAA, Transport Canada, Airlines for America, Boeing and Airbus, IATA, and ICAO, amongst others, have been invited to participate. And we actually timed the conference to immediately precede the FAA and EASA, their European counterparts, annual safety conference, so that way we can draw as influential audience as possible. There was just some reference to Malaysia 370, and of course the crew and the passengers are in our thoughts. And with the disappearance of the flight and the call for the deployment of a broad network of stepped-up flight crew monitoring, the timing could not possibly be better for us to reiterate our position on the wise and unwise uses of data. And as terrible as obviously the Malaysia situation is, the one positive thing is that it gives us the opportunity to get off this kind of roulette wheel of media speculation and talking heads and everything else that I was talking about, and really focus the conversation on where it should be. And that's seeing a more precise, globally deployed, satellite-based set of navigation and surveillance systems which enable us to track and drive up the level of safety and efficiency in our air traffic management system. Fortunately, the timing is also great for our speaker tomorrow, because you're going to hear from the CEO of Iridium, which is involved in an endeavor called Arion, and they are one of the industry folks that is in the forefront of pushing for globally satellite-based navigation air traffic management systems. I'm positive you're going to find his presentation very interesting, because it's going to affect all of us. There's not one person in this room right now that doesn't have something that has a lithium battery on their person right now, I guarantee you. And so, staying on the international thread for a bit longer, despite some strong resistance from quarters elsewhere, we're successful earlier this year in achieving a significant enhancement to international standards for transporting lithium batteries by air at the International Civil Aviation Organization. ALPA recently appealed to the Department of Transportation Secretary and the head of the Pipeline Hazardous and Material Safety Administration, otherwise known as PHMSA, to issue a final rule that brings U.S. regulations into conformance with ICAO standards. We have to be pragmatic in realizing that the world runs on different technologies, and we want to facilitate the safe transfer of these things, but there's still simply no excuse for losing another airplane, passenger, or freighter to a runaway lithium battery incident, as happened a few years ago with UPS-6. We intend to continue to advocate smartly and vigorously towards further mitigating the safety risks associated with lithium transport. I don't think there will ever be an exec board where I don't talk about the topic of NextGen, and this one is obviously no different. As a reminder, NextGen is basically the deployment of equipment, policies, and procedures that drive up the efficiency of our air transport system while maintaining or boosting levels of safety. The ongoing challenge with NextGen is that unlike transportation infrastructure such as crumbling bridges or potholed roads, it's very, very difficult to explain the importance of this infrastructure program, which is really on par with the highway program back when they started putting the interstate system into effect. The heat on this issue has, however, been turned up, and I believe we are really truly at a tipping point where we need to keep up the pressure to avoid delay in moving forward on this critically needed overhaul of the U.S. transportation system. ALPA has an increasing presence at both the management and technical levels, from the NextGen Advisory Committee all the way down to multiple RTCA, which is a federal advisory commission, they set standards, committees that are doing the critical work of setting the standards that we are going to live by and fly by for years to come. It's incredibly important for all of us because this is going to be a differentiator in the industry, and if we are not leading the way, then competitors from abroad will eat our lunch on this issue. Now on to UAS. That's another thing. I don't think anybody can open up a newspaper or turn on a TV set without seeing some story about octocopters and six-packs of beer being dropped off at ice houses and other things. A particular note in the NextGen work is the tremendous and increasing pressure to permit remotely piloted aircraft, otherwise known as RPAs, into United States and Canadian civil airspace. RTCA continues to develop standards for RPA detect and avoid and lost link systems, and ALPA has several representatives right now working on multiple groups. We're holding firm to our conviction that weaving RPAs into the U.S. airspace must be done properly, and the operations must conform to current safety standards, because as recent news stories bear out, the situation will only get worse if those standards are not identified and a clear pathway for safe integration is followed. North of the border, our ALPA President's Committee for Remote Operations continues to work with Transport Canada, NAV Canada, airlines and airports to improve operating conditions, including navigation facilities for our members who fly in the far north, often in gravel and ice. And I was able to travel up to Ottawa to join Peter Black and others when they released the findings from the First Air accident. And the one thing that was borne out, and it's borne out in every accident, there's a whole series of causal factors that relate to these tragedies. And the facilities and infrastructure was certainly one of those factors that was identified. In the security domain, I'm happy to report that in part because of ALPA's strong and consistent messaging and advocacy over the last several years, TSA has embraced risk-based security as its core means of preserving and enhancing the level of security for our crewmates and passengers under challenging fiscal realities. That better approach to aviation security includes the popular PreCheck program for passengers, known crew member, and other screening programs that make the best use of limited security resources. And speaking of known crew member, as of today, 46 U.S. airports have known crew member screening stations currently in operations right now. And actually, as of this Friday, I believe, and Lee's going to be happy to hear this, New Orleans is supposed to go live with known crew member. By the end of the summer, we expect to have 60 U.S. airports included in the KCM program. Of note also is we're working to include TSA, actually to compel TSA to include Jazz as the first non-U.S. airline to participate in the program. And you might also have noted that recently a Canadian operation airline actually has now been granted access to the PreCheck program crossing the border. And if you read the fast read yesterday, you'll also note that Transport Canada has actually granted an exemption for the first time that creates flight deck access for offline jump seaters within the Canadian operations. And this comes after months and actually indeed years of meetings with ALPA pilots and the Transport Canada regulatory folks pushing on this issue. We forged recently a new strategic alliance with the FBI in the jointly sponsored campaign to heighten laser awareness, and we rolled out a campaign which debuted across 12 cities to raise awareness of the consequences of illegal laser attacks on aircraft cockpits. Despite the fact that with strong ALPA support, the U.S. government had made lasing a federal crime punishable by up to $250,000 and 5 years worth of imprisonment, laser illuminations had continued to increase up to the point where in the U.S. at least it was north of 11 hits per day. And I think everybody can extrapolate that even though we haven't had any serious incidents because of that, the law of averages kind of kicks in when those numbers keep on driving up. Fortunately, there's a good story here. Now what I believe is a result directly of this public advocacy campaign and some of the interaction that we've had and leadership, the rate of laser attacks has actually declined to just under 10, especially in the markets in which the campaigns were focused. It's of course too early to claim victory on this one, and one laser strike is of course a laser strike too many, but I'm happy to report that this coalition of key stakeholders who have worked so hard to stem this rising tide are now seeing tangible results of their work. One thing I'm not happy to report about is the status of the FFDO program, and in fact the Obama administration has proposed reducing the funding for the FFDO program from $25 million to $20.9 million, which is better than what they had proposed the last time around. But while TSA has been looking at ways to reduce outlays, our government affairs lobbyists have been working very hard up on Capitol Hill to restore adequate funding for this very effective and very beneficial program. Along those lines, it's my great hope that as one of the named members now of by the Secretary of Homeland Security to the TSA's Aviation Security Advisory Committee, I'll have the opportunity on your behalf to offer significant and substantive inputs to the group. I think this is another clear example where smart strategic alliances can help steer priorities, policies, and an agenda that so impacts our world of aviation. Of course, the greatest alliance we have right now is here in ALPA. The greatest alliance we have right here is in ALPA with our union of 32 separate pilot groups who have one strong, vigorous approach to aviation safety and security, speaking with one voice to represent the interest of airline pilots, the traveling public, and shippers all over North America. ALPA continues to expand upon the effective and constructive partnerships we have cultivated with other stakeholders in the air transportation system. And the premier event of the Air Safety Organization is our Air Safety and Security Week, where we highlight the power of those partnerships. I invite you to join us at this event, which is going to be just up in D.C. At the Washington Hilton from August 4th to August 7th. At ASF 60, not only will you be able to get a more comprehensive view of the amazing work done on your behalf by our hundreds of volunteers, but you'll also witness firsthand the amount of respect we continue to earn from the aviation industry. That screenshot you see is actually going to be the face of the new iPhone and Droid program that we are designed in-house. You'll notice at the very bottom of that shot from the iPhone, it says powered by ALPA. We conceived, designed, and implemented that entire program in-house. I think that is very noteworthy, and it shows the power of the resources that we have to bear on your behalf. Please do support your volunteers in attending the Air Safety Forum, because as BOD is to this group, the Air Safety Forum is to us. Let me close by the same way I opened, by thanking you for all you do, for the support you give to our members each day as they move us towards a goal of one level of safety and security. And Jim, JetBlue, purely opportunistic, selfish reasons, welcome aboard, because I can't wait to get my hands on some of your folks and plug them into the Air Safety Organization. Thank you.